Hey guys, so I am chilling at New York Beer Project. It is January 31st. So I just had a really strange set of events happen, right? So there's a lot of good and bad. It was just a lot. It was really funny, right? Because there was this, and part of me is like not even sure where to start. So I think what it is, so I came here because I was like kind of feeling lonely. I had a really good day, right? So this was after speaking with Warlion, a bunch of people. So I came here kind of like to celebrate by myself. I was feeling like a little like in need of company, so I started talking to this one bartender lady here. We'll call her Karenina. And so Karenina, I was talking to her, and her sister is someone who I met here before. We'll call her Spears, right? And then what was interesting is, and we just had a company of people pass by, right? And I'll talk to you guys about them in a second. So Karenina and Spears, right? They're sisters. And so I started speaking to them. And what was interesting is like, and you could tell like, what's difficult about kind of talking, reaching out to people is people kind of treat you like they treat me a lot like I'm like a sideshow or an event, right? Like a lot of times they don't really treat me like I'm a real person. At first, it used to bother me when I was younger, right? But I just realized, like, I have to get used to this, right? Because right now, nobody knows who I am, right? But in about 2 or 3 years, I'm not going to be able to show up in public like this and be obscure, right? Because people are just going to know who I am, right? So I just have to be okay with people doing that. So it was getting used to that. So these people come over, and like Karenina brought a bunch of her friends, and they started talking to me. And it was interesting, like I was like, they were kind of talking to me like I was a sideshow, so I was like, okay, well that's interesting, right? And yeah, it was just very interesting, and it was like a lot of positivity. And then there's like a bunch of people came over. There was this girl who reminded me of Lydia. I'll call her Lydia. And she was talking about how she's like really into art, and she likes to work with her hands. So I was like, oh, hey, you should totally help me with like my game that I'm working on, because I'm not very good at it and I could use some help. I'm worried that I came off a bit too intense, because I was like, hey, like reach out to me. I won't chase you, but please reach out. And maybe I said it too much. And I don't know if I was coming from a place of, like, I just don't know how it comes off. There's a part of me that's really past caring, like just emotionally, I'm like, I don't really care. Like I'm pretty satisfied and cool with myself. And that was the interesting thing is like, guys, you can feel lonely and still be good to yourself. Like feeling lonely has nothing to do with like your self-worth. Like they're not connected, right? So anyway, so after talking with them or whatever, I overheard a conversation, and I was like, oh, hey, like, what are you guys saying, right? And this one woman, I'll call her the whale. So the whale was talking to another one. We'll call her the orca. So the whale and the orca are talking to each other. So the whale is telling the orca, like, hey, you just need to sleep around, right? And the whale, we'll call him whale prime, right? Dude's just sitting there over in the corner. And so there's like 5 people, right? So there's like 5 people, and it's just me talking. And then I was like, oh, like, don't let me interrupt. But like I heard that, and it was just kind of shocking. And they're like, no, what's your opinion? And so I gave my opinion, because she was telling her to sleep around. I was like, yeah, like if you sleep around, like that's like driving a Lamborghini through like the mud or something like that. Like that's not very good. That's not a really good way to treat yourself. And then, you know, the whale was in uproar and being like, oh, you're a man and you have an opinion and da-da-da-da-da. And she kept trying to insult me, and it was really hilarious, because it was like, imagine like, even though like she was a whale, right? It felt like, I don't know, it was really like kind of childish, and she kept trying to insult me and like trying to dig at me. And when I kept asking her to articulate her point, she just didn't want to have the conversation, because she wasn't very good, like strong in her argument, and she couldn't really, and they were trying to shut down the conversation, because you could tell like they knew they were about to step into something like that they weren't prepared for, right? And I was just asking questions, trying to understand their point, and they just kept changing subjects and going back and forth. They were insulting me. And there's this one woman, we'll call her the mediator. She was a bit more kind, but it was just very interesting. Like the whale was the loudest one, and you could probably tell like she was definitely probably the most neglected, and it just showed up, right? And she was driving a lot of attention, and it was sad because you could see everybody around her kind of just have their countenance dip, because I don't know, you could just tell there was a loss of dignity. And like Whale Prime, like he stepped in and was like, oh hey, chill out, and he didn't like it when she got angry, and it was just kind of like it was a bit of a sad, it was just kind of a sad interaction of like, oh yeah, like this is what's going on in America. People don't really know how to talk. And you could tell like she was like throwing insults, stuff like that. But when she saw it wasn't affecting me, and it was crazy. Like she was saying that, I was like, and I just kept interpreting her insults as like compliments, and she kept trying to make these digs, and I was just non-reactive. I was like, oh yeah. And I was super proud of myself. I was really amazed at like how well I was just like laughing, and I was like, okay, yeah, like and just trying to understand their point. And it was crazy, like she just started talking herself. You could tell like as she kept talking, she could just feel and how she was losing everybody. You could just tell like as she talked, you could tell like when her husband stopped agreeing with her, when her friends stopped agreeing with her, and just like little by little. And then she walked off, and then her friends kind of dripped away from me little by little, and they wanted to stick around. But then like I was just like, no, you can go, like you can go. And it was like the girl that she was advising stepped away, and like I could tell like I was able to have a conversation. I was trying to invest in this woman, but you could tell she had like her allegiance. Like the orca was tied, because on one end the orca was like, she wanted to hear what I was saying, because I was trying to tell her like, hey, you have lots of self-worth and you're worth well. But like the whale was like, you have no self-worth, you don't have any worth. Like she literally said that verbatim. She said that verbatim. You don't have any worth. Who has worth? Nobody has worth. That's what she said verbatim. Like I'm not making this up. And I was like, do you see what you're arguing for? You're literally arguing that you have no worth. And then when I brought that up, she started trying to change her argument, and it was just crazy. Like you could see her talk herself out of her argument, and like she was just losing people. And so eventually the orca kind of broke off and went with the rest of the pod or whatever, right? And Whale Prime, you could tell that this guy was like he really loved this woman, and he was just trying his best to like love the whale. And yeah, it was just very it was a very interesting thing. I'm really proud because my emotions I was surprised how steady it was. Even though like I was kind of in this place where I was feeling my stuff over here, I was able to stay present enough with the conversation, and just like really, it was just crazy how like by just standing there listening and like repeating back what she said, like that's all it took. Like when she would say something stupid, I didn't tell her how stupid it was. I just had to repeat back to her what she said and be like, is that what you mean? And then you could just tell, like every time I asked that, the argument would just unravel, right? And then eventually she stepped away, and it was a little like upgrade. And I saw like when people say silly things, you don't have to argue with them. You don't have to tell them why it's stupid. Like you can state your opinion, and then when they have the emotional reaction, at that point, your goal is to really tamper down their emotions. It's not an intellectual thing at that point. It's on an emotional level. So to emotionally give them that energy and to steady the boat, you have to be non-reactive. And that's just from listening to them and literally just repeating back what they say. And you could tell, like, that's all I did. Like, I just sat there and I just repeated back what they said. And just eventually you could tell, like, they were losing. It was so funny because as she talked, you could just see her losing her friends one by one. Like, they were all just, like, slowly disagreeing with her and be like, I don't know why she's like that. Her husband's like, I don't know why she's like that. And everyone was just like, yeah, I don't know why she's like that. And, like, you could just tell, like, and she could see and feel it. That's why she eventually broke off, because she just could feel she wasn't going to win this one, because I was just sitting there and all I was doing was literally, guys, I was just sitting there repeating back what she was saying and saying it. Like, I was just saying back what she was saying. And I was like, is this what you mean? Is that what you mean? And I didn't have to argue with it, because like the stupidity was apparent and everybody could see that. So this is like a really good way to go into like public debate, especially when you have an argument that someone can't articulate and they don't know what they're talking about. All you have to do is, like, especially when you know like they can't do it, you don't have to play any games with it. You don't have to manipulate it. You just repeat back what they say to them. Just be like, so is this what you mean? And then say that. And then if they don't, let them correct themselves. And if they don't, let them correct themselves. And then eventually, if they do that enough times, they're eventually either going to have to like come to a reasonable discourse, or they're going to want to leave. And the thing is, when you're doing this in a big, wide public forum, they're going to publicly humiliate themselves. Just like how even a group of her friends, where I was a stranger, there was no emotional attachment to me, and I was starting to win each of them one by one, and all I had to do, I didn't have to argue my point, I just repeated back what she was saying. Because it was retarded, it was a completely retarded argument, right? So I didn't have to argue it. It was just like, is that what you're saying? And it was just about like women, how sleeping around has no worth. And then I would just ask questions, and she was like, and then I was like, so what do you believe like sex is for? And she's like, it's enjoyment and procreation, da 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 da. I'm like, so don't believe there's any consequences for sleeping around? And she's like, well, like STDs and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, do you believe? And then just once I started asking like questions to clarify, you could just see the argument unravel. And she's just, you could tell like she wasn't trying to have civil discourse. She asked my opinion so she could fight back and project her anger out on me. But that's what happens when someone who's probably vibrating in like shame or like guilt or apathy meets someone of higher vibration. They're gonna move into anger, right? And like that's what she started expressing, and she's projecting that anger onto me, and they're expressing that. And like you could just tell like everybody was watching her, and they can be like, oh, well, this guy was an asshole, and they'll talk shit. But like that's the thing is like, if this was recorded, you guys got to understand, if this was recorded in the court of public opinion, she would completely get cooked, because she was getting cooked by her own friends. So it was a really cool thing. I learned that, and if I didn't speak up, I wouldn't have learned that. So that was really cool. And so I'm just gonna keep working that technique, refining it, see if I can build more bridges, and yeah, just keep going. So I'm super happy and proud of myself. Sometimes I worry that when I'm lonely, I'm too earnest. There's a part of me that worries about that, but there's another part of me that doesn't really care. But I just hope some people reach out, because I have about 4 or 5 more days here, and I have to move on. And I'm just hoping to have more engaging conversations and more genuine interactions. So here, let's keep going, guys. Stay happy, stay healthy. I'm gonna put the description of the game link down below. Peace.